recording now.
Yeah.
Because we officially on time right now.
Yes.
Okay. So does it go live? Okay. So all right. So officially, where's my mouse? There it is. I will. It's in the
I can't believe that
there you
that's
go.
a virtual background, Dick. You look very smart.
Well, I can always, given that you are the key person on this call, I can always change it for you.
That's okay. I think it's fantastic. My background is completely real. This is my real computer, and this is a real plant.
Right. Well,
So nothing fancy here.
You can even do a video if you like. He's one
Ooh.
of, or maybe one of Hong Kong.
Oh, so the plants are real. The
plants are real. Yeah, I'll put the
and the chair's real.
Yeah, the chair's real. But originally I was going to have this because I know your viewers are around the world.
Oh no, that makes me sad. No, because I can't go around the world.
That's it. I'll back to the normal background. Okay,
That's
so
good.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to put us on gallery view. So if you want to see both of us at once, put us on gallery view. And we are recording this seminar live. So thank you for everyone who's joined. And I have posted on Facebook in the meantime. If you have any questions, open the Q&A box down the bottom and ask myself or Danielle any questions that you might have. And we also have a Zoom chat box. So generally we'll reserve this for when we ask for anything, or we maybe ask for, you know, if everyone can hear us and any responses to anything that we might say. So I'd like to welcome Danielle Fairhurst. And I've known Danielle for, is it 20 years now?
No, can't be that long.
Cash
Nearly.
Card, 20 years, yeah. Well, I joined Cash Card almost 20 years ago. I think it was about close to 20 years. So, and Danielle was in a different area to me. I was the business analysis manager for a certain area. And Danielle was in the finance department specifically, and she was doing all these fancy stuff. I remember on financial modeling. I had done quite different fancy stuff on financial modeling because I was very focused on the business acquisition and financial. I was doing a lot of financial modeling. We were doing business acquisitions, and I was valuing companies. And I noticed a lot of the fancy stuff that Danielle did on her spreadsheets. And I never got that chance to ask her that much about it, actually, because she left to start her own business. Or you left originally, you went on maternity leave, and then you started your own business in the meantime. And I remember I went to your first book launch. Your first book launch, which was it 10 years ago?
2010, I think it was.
Yeah, so 10 years ago now. And it was financial modeling on Excel was your first book.
Yeah, so that I've actually got a copy here. This is the third edition now. So I've published this one 3 times.
Oh wow!
Have you been to all of my book launches? I think you might have been.
I've been to the original one, unless you had relaunches.
No, I didn't do I only did a book launch the first time, and then this Dummies book was last.
So the Dummies book was a year or so ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. I remember you came to that one. Yeah,
I came to that one as well, and I was very impressed because it's very hard to get onto it, invited to write a Dummies book, because really there's only one person that gets invited to write a Dummies book.
I couldn't believe that there wasn't a Dummies book for financial modeling already.
Well, I guess some might think it's quite niche, but it's not really, is it? Most analysts.
I don't think so. I think it's a very broad topic, really.
Most financial most accountants who've done anything on reporting on Excel have done a reasonable amount of financial modeling. But you've developed your business and you speak around the world and train around the world now. You train in Middle East, you train in Europe, I was in New Zealand. Have you trained Tasmania? That's overseas.
I have. I've been to Tasmania a few times for training. I've been to so many places.
So that technically that's overseas. I like to call it the third island of New Zealand. Some people call it. But you've developed this great training business on Excel. You teach people how to also become certified in financial modeling as well. And I didn't even know that was such a thing. I've just learned financial modeling as I've been doing.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that you kind of learn on the job as you go. Most people learn it that way as you did.
And I've got fairly broad experience in financial modeling, but every time I go to a new company to consult with them, I always find new things that I didn't know. And these are probably things that you know off the back of your hand, but I didn't know how to do those things. So the companies I myself have worked for, I think there's about a dozen industries working on acquisitions, and it's quite varied the amount of financial modeling work, from the day-to-day, month-to-month reporting stuff, as well as mergers and acquisitions, stuff that you almost have to create from scratch. And also working with Big Four accounting firms on the work that they do on their financial models, reviewing and analyzing some of the work, looking at best practices. So for Danielle, you've trained all sorts of people all around the world. You've got a huge following. How big is your following on LinkedIn in terms of your financial modeling Excel group now?
In the forum, I think we've got about 45,000
45,000. I thought I was doing okay with some of my meetup groups and things. But you've got
pretty popular.
50,000 people.
I think with that one, I was probably one of the first people to set it up as a group. So it kind of, you get that traction.
Okay. And yeah, look, it's something I think definitely follow it. If you haven't followed it, you get all these great information on financial modeling Excel. I don't personally think it will go out of fashion anytime soon.
Financial modeling or Excel?
Financial modeling and Excel, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people put out this new software, but I always found that if you want to do some of the sexy stuff, some of the stuff that, because some of that software requires years to create, and sometimes the reports that they do is not very flexible. So even
I might just, seeing as you've raised that topic, Dick, I might just go into that a little bit about that idea. People often ask me about software, about using other software other than Excel for financial modeling, and because Excel is Excel. It's fantastic, but it's not. We often call it the Swiss Army knife of software. Because it can do just about anything, but it's certainly got its issues, and there is generally another piece of software that might do something just as well or better. And people are constantly coming out with new pieces of software for financial modeling. But the thing is that it's I suppose what I try to do is to make models that are easily accessible for other people, because financial modeling is very much a collaborative thing. So you build a model and you want other people to access it. And if you build it using a proprietary piece of software, other people can't access it unless they have to buy a license or they know how to use it. Whereas Excel is just Excel. And so I think it's best for you and your organization to just use Excel. I think it's just a much better tool. And also for your career going forward to have, in my opinion, it's one of the best things you can do for your career is to improve your Excel skills. And by building financial models, you'll do that, definitely.
There's companies I've been to, and just on the topic of needing Excel, that a lot of these companies, medium-sized companies, $100 million turnover, they may have an analyst or two, but the reality is the learning or their skill set, they may think it's advanced, but you can do some fairly simple stuff. And the CFO, thinks that, they haven't seen stuff like that before.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to wow.
It's pretty easy to wow, even on some very basic stuff. And there's still features that I've been using, even when we work together. At CashCard, I learned something, and I've found that, even almost 20 years later, very, very few people use that. Something like using scenario tables. And it's not that difficult to learn, but it's very, very useful. And pretty much I found most companies, even with teams of analysts, don't use data tables or basic scenario tables for their work. And it's very useful. And when you present on it, it just gives everyone a bit of a wow feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is. it is one of those, I think the reason a lot of people don't use data tables, for example, is because they can be a little bit tricky to get your head around. But once you've got the hang of it, they're pretty straightforward and they're really, really powerful. But they can be just a little bit confusing, which one is the input, which one is the output. So sometimes people don't necessarily use them that much.
Yes. And I think a little bit of that is sometimes people just don't know what you can do in Excel.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And until you see it, until you've seen someone who's an expert at it, like yourself, then we just don't, a lot of that is just knowing it's there so you can work out and ask the right questions to find out how to do it. So what we might do is just start in a structured way now. Now we've got a bunch of people on board. So I know you wanted to answer this question, the question of what is financial modeling, because I think a lot of people a little bit have different ideas about it. What do you think is financial modeling?
Yeah, a lot of people, I find it really interesting when you ask people that and they come up with all sorts of definitions. Especially to do with that. Have you ever seen on the financial modeling group, you often get people, wanting to find work as a model, like a catwalk model. They get kind of confused with the idea. Have you seen those posts? I leave them up there because they make me laugh so much. So financial modeling has got nothing to do with fashion or catwalks or anything like that.
You're pretty.
No, not at all. Not at all. So the idea of a model or a financial model is it's generally a structured layout. It's financial. It's usually got, it's to do with cash flow or financial projections. Normally there's some kind of a problem that you've got or a question that you want answered by the financial model. So generally it might be something like, how much money, if we launch a new product, how much money are we going to make on this new product? Or what is our budget for next year? Or what is our company worth if we were to take over this other company? What's the value of it, or something like that? So you normally it's forward projecting. So it's normally looking out for 12 months, for 5 years, for 10 years, 20 years even. And it's kind of a structure in Excel, and we've normally got months across the top. Not always, but most of the time you've got your months across the top. And then you've got some historical history normally, and then you might use projections or assumptions or drivers to look forward to say, what's the answer to the question. So how much money are we going to make? Or, and then you can sort of come up with the outputs in that way. Most financial models will be like, if you're building, if somebody asks you for the financial model of the company, what they mean is that they want to see the entire business's financial model, and they want to see the P&L, the cash flow, and the balance sheet. So they want to see all of those. And that's kind of the core or the fundamental skill of financial modeling, is being able to build that sort of linking those interdependencies between, for example, as an accountant, you understand the difference between the P&L and the cash flow, but actually having that linking from one sheet to another, I mean, that's the real power of a financial model. So if, for example, your revenue was to go down, and you see how that impacts your cash flow, and then that means that maybe you need some, you can see in the projections of your cash flow, we might need to borrow some more money, so that means you have to bring on some debt, and then you would see that showing on your balance sheet as a liability, and then that would then drive your interest payments, maybe that would drive your funding, your ratios. Like, everything is linked right throughout the model. I mean, that's kind of an example of a full, we call that a three-way financial model, a P&L, cash flow, balance sheet. But a lot of the stuff that we were doing back in the cash card days was more to do with management accounting. So we were doing a lot of budgeting and a lot of, like you were doing a lot of valuations. So, how much is the business worth? And so you might only be concerned with the cash flow. So you wouldn't bother with the balance sheet, for example, or you might be, when I was doing a lot of budgeting, I spent most of my time on the P&L.
Mm-hmm.
And I still do a lot of P&L modeling. So you're really just concerned with the revenue and the sort of management report, like management accounting stuff, where you're just looking at the profitability of different products or different organizations. But now as a consultant, I just work on so many different situations and different companies and different problems. So I'm working on 2 projects at the moment. I've been wrestling with some loan calculations today. So looking at like a principal versus interest calculation, and then how that impacts loans. And the other one is that's some loan calculations as well. I'm working on that. So I tend to work on different projects concurrently, because there's not much training happening at the moment.
No, I guess online training. And it's strange.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of online seminars.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd give you a call, and you've got me on in June. Here's my thing. I think a lot of people, in my experience, given that I'm not an accountant, I've never been an accountant, just so you know, I've never been a CPA, an accountant. I've always started as an analyst. And when I listed for work for analysts, I get a lot of accountants apply. And they may have done some Excel. Most of them have done some Excel, but they're not necessarily very advanced on it. But my biggest problem is not necessarily the technical skills. So the technical skills is one part, and we can address that with courses and looking at other models. But the other part is the understanding of a business. Because the model is, to me, if you ask me what a financial model is, and I answered off the top of my head, a financial model is representing of something like a business on a spreadsheet. It takes account of the past, it looks into the future, and it has the relevant inputs, and it shows how life would be in the future, in the past.
So it's a representation of the real world. Yeah.
And so this is where I find accountants can struggle. The accountants can struggle because their habit is actually just looking at the past and getting the numbers done for the month. What I found is, even if I ask financial controllers, the level below CFO, for example, like, how do we do this month? Often they can't answer the question because they're so focused on getting the numbers in balanced. They don't really know what the numbers might mean. And then
they only, and I kind of recall sort of when I was in investment banking, actually, we used to be so focused on the like the actual transactions, and you don't actually think about what the meaning of that. You're talking about millions of dollars, like that actually means something, or it should, but you don't always see the big picture.
Yeah. And I think one of the skills that I think with financial modeling, apart from the technical side, apart from knowing what cash flow and balance sheet and things are, is trying to visualize what is really going to happen. And I found, even in budgeting, something simple as budgeting, I could look at a budget and think, is that realistic or not? And step in and debate that with the business manager. Or if I'm doing an acquisition, is this company really going to work? Are they really going to do these numbers in the future? And I think that's sort of a missing element sometimes in people who want to become financial analysts. It's not just the technical. It's this idea that this model represents a business. You have to understand the business. And sometimes you call it in to build, let's say if you're building a model from scratch, you really have to understand the components, what's really driving these factors. I don't know if that's your experience as well, but my thing is, I find it sometimes difficult to hire strict accountants to become analysts and then to become financial modelers because of that reason.
It's quite a different skill set.
Okay. So the next question we're going to talk about is, why is financial modeling important? How do you learn it? What's the best way of learning something like that?
Yeah, I might actually, there's a couple of questions on the Q&A, Dick. I don't know whether you saw those. Should we just tackle those first before we move on to that?
I'll go closer to me so I can actually see them.
That's okay. There's just a question from Rajesh, and he says, are most financial models based on that most financial models are based on mathematical formulas. So how much of predictive and time series modeling are commonly used? A lot, basically. A lot. There's a lot of predictive and time series. Almost every model is time series based. It's either monthly or quarterly or annual or something like that. My tip with that, of course, is that try to put it to the lowest amount possible. Like if you think that if you've got sometimes, with a long-term infrastructure model, you might do it on an annual basis. And then at the end of the project, they say, oh, can we see the cash flow monthly? And you're like, oh, I have to convert everything to monthly. So it's better to do it on a monthly basis, and then you can summarize it to annual. But then sometimes you might even need to see it on a weekly basis. So always sort of having that time series, definitely. And so so I hope that answers your question, Rajesh.
Yeah, and I agree. That's my experience. Pretty much every model is time series. And the question is it yearly, is it monthly? Monthly, if you're doing evaluation on cash flow, is often quite important because evaluation is based on the amount of cash because that comes in for business. So the next question is, what are other tools in Excel that are industry favorites?
Other than Excel, I think.
Excel.
Yeah. I don't. There's just hundreds of them, and I don't really want to.
There is a, and I think the problem
have you
is
used any?
I have used stuff, but see, a lot of these other tools aren't necessary for financial modeling. They're for report.
Often there'll be add-ins to Excel as well.
Yeah, I find that they're more for reporting. So if you have a company with a lot of different business streams, you create a report for those guys to analyze their business. Financial modeling can be obviously more specific, and not often, if you're valuing a business, you usually don't get a bunch of software that can do that. You have to do it in Excel. Budgeting and such, a lot of people like to move. I've experienced this. Companies at a certain size, they say, "Oh, we're going to move off Excel in budgeting and go to other things,"
which is a very high ideals, and it's certainly to be applauded. That sort of idea that you might want to do that.
You're going to say, "But," right? There's this but. Yeah,
it's not always practical. We say, yeah, we're not going to use Excel anymore, and then we use Excel.
Yeah, I personally found it not really worked that well. You almost have to get to quite a large size.
Yes, really big. Yeah.
Practical. Like I've had a budget I developed, which required 100 different spreadsheets to link with it. Right. So a lot of these departments had their own spreadsheet, and they come and integrate them. And then they wanted to move to this new software. I think the software was called Forecaster, Microsoft Forecaster. And the reality was, I don't think it went very well. And we still used Excel for a lot of it anyway. So, and it lacked a lot of flexibility to do things. And you quite train all these people who really only did certain small things in the spreadsheet to now learn this new software. So it became a lot less flexible. I don't think it worked very well. But the company paid a bunch of money for licensing, etc. So they're committed to it. So I didn't think we end up with a better system or faster system. But it might end up with...
And then you have to pay for licenses. You have to learn how to use it. And... and train everybody, and by the time you get up to speed, you just think, well, I could have just built that in Excel.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one reason why people do it as well. I think people feel like if that person left, there's a level of expertise required.
Yeah. I mean, Excel's certainly, like, it's got error. It's prone to error. If you don't use good practice. And it doesn't handle large quantities of data very well, which of course we get around now with Power BI and Power Pivot and things like that. But yeah, Excel can be quite problematic. Yeah, so I hope that answers Rajesh's questions there. Having said that, actually, about that, it's funny that as you probably know, Dick, I run some virtual meetups as well, sort of similar, but I specialise in financial modelling, and we've normally been doing them about once a month as face-to-face meetups, and then since the lockdown, I've been going into overdrive, and I've been doing them about once a week. And I just
and where do you post these on, just so people want to find out more? Where would they find out?
Oh, all over. I have a page. We could just pop that in chat. Actually, it's plumsolutions.com.au/meetup. So I list all of them because some of them are on different platforms. Most of them are through Zoom. So I might just pop that in the chat if I can.
Just make sure you put all panelists and attendees.
Yeah, if anyone's going to put anything in the chat, make sure you change it to all panelists and attendees. I'm just going to pop it in there. So that's the page where all of the meetups
and anything which is a question. I see a couple more questions pop up. Anything which is a question in the Q&A box. There's a Q&A box on the bottom as well. So okay, so
I was just saying about the software. There was a guy in the UK who's a project finance specialist, and he agreed to do a session for me on project finance. And I thought, oh great, and then he said, oh, I've got this new project finance software, financial modeling tool. It's better than Excel. And I went, oh, okay, because you know how I feel about tools that are not Excel. And so we're going to do it, and he is going to build a project finance model in 20 minutes. So that sounds like it's going to be a really interesting one. So he's going to use this other tool. So if anyone's interested in project finance, so project finance is where you're building a financial model for large infrastructure projects.
Right.
And they're really complex. Like they take weeks or months to build.
Wow.
And so he's got this software that will build it in 20 minutes. So I'm interested to see that. So having said that, I'm not a big fan of other software. We'll see how we go. Yeah.
Look, I've been involved in a lot of other software.
Yeah.
Moving towards it, getting away from Excel. There's a lot more. I find it's even more complex sometimes than just doing Excel. Now, that's because I'm familiar with Excel, but I find that there's a different type of complexity now when you have to train people on the software. You have to almost build stuff in the back end. So you can't not everyone can just quickly check the code, for example, and say, oh, where does this go? So that's my experience. You even require more specialization. So worrying about someone who's just an expert at Excel, if you lose them, you have to find someone else. I find, you're going to get someone who's a specialist in that software. And if they leave, you have to find another specialist in that software to do it. So I don't think it's a better substitute, personally.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
much easier to find somebody. And as someone who's looking for work, it's easier to be expert in Excel than a specific type of software because it's going to open a lot more doors for you.
And by Excel, we mean not just plain Excel, we mean Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power BI as well. When we say Excel, we mean all of that.
Yeah, and you're specialized, and I haven't really even touched on that stuff too myself.
Yeah, well, for modelling, not so much. We don't use Power BI, for example. Although we've got a session coming up on Wednesday on building a P&L in Power BI. So
okay,
that'll be
cool.
That's exciting.
So let's cover these couple questions that we're discussing. So, someone said, bearing in mind in Australia that the payroll system is a weekly basis, do you think it's building budget on a weekly basis?
Yes. What do you think, Dick?
Look, I think there's ways around it. You can always put a number of weeks. If you want what happens is if it's weekly based, some months have 4 and some weeks have 5. So what I find, instead of having a spreadsheet which goes like, so many columns, you have a month and you say how many weeks in that month. Yeah. And you can do that, and then you apply it that way because then you can see a cash flow. That's the way
for payroll, you're right. We would do it like that. We'd say this is a 4-week month or this is a 5-week month, and then adjust the payroll accordingly. Or sometimes we do budget on a weekly basis if that's appropriate. I mean, columns are free. It's just an extra pile of columns. It's just a matter of doing 52 columns instead of 12. I mean, it's really not. You'd still. One of the principles of best practice in financial modeling is having exactly the same formulas all the way across. So it's really not a lot of extra work to do 52 columns as opposed to 12 columns. So I don't really see a problem with doing a weekly budget if that suits your business. And that's the beauty of doing it in Excel, is that it's completely customizable and you can build it in such a way that it's bespoke and appropriate to your situation.
Yeah, understood. So it says, could you comment on the visualization angle of financial modeling?
Yeah, I think that's often something that's often neglected by financial modelers. They don't always think about the visual side of things. So having it looking, presenting it as a chart. I think a financial model really is not complete unless you do at least sort of one chart on the output to show, some sort of a trend or something like that. If you're using a lot of data and you need a dashboard, I'd probably move to Power BI, because that's a dashboarding and a visualization tool. But in Excel, you can totally stay in Excel and create a whole lot of charts very easily.
Okay. No, I agree. And this is my experience. One of the reasons I get caught in for some of these jobs is because the finance department or the accountants might have built a model, and then they have to give it to somebody to fill in, or they have to present it to the board or something. And then it often gets rejected because it didn't look like it was easy to follow. So sometimes what it requires is sometimes just tacking on a front page that attaches to that data that you've got, or creating a way to input the data that transfer to that sheet. So instead of having the whole calculation sheet where you go and find the row and column and manually enter inputs, you have a separate maybe input sheet, and you have a separate output sheet that you can present to a board, or you can present as a summary. You can put different graphs, you can put KPIs, and dashboards if that's what's required, that people look in that way. So I think if you are, and this is part of the topic, is if you want to become successful and get recognized as a financial modeler and an analyst, don't just think about the technical side, the science and formula and the macro and that side of it. Think about the presentation and acceptance at the level where people will use it for inputs and the people use it for outputs.
that people trust your models more if you use formatting. They've done some research about which reports or models people actually think that the numbers are more accurate, and if you use formatting and make it look professional, people actually think your numbers are more accurate. So I find there's a really easy way to gain credibility, is to just spend a bit of time making it look good.
Yeah. If I was to just talk off the top of my head, I think the guys who can make it look good will automatically be paid 30% more.
I think so.
Because the guys who make it look good are the guys who are, number one, trusted, and the guys who seem to talk more frequently and are comfortable talking with that senior management level. Rather than the guy who's just in the engine room doing,
because certainly with analytic, it's an analytical skill, and modeling is a technical skill. So it's kind of like a left brain, right brain thing, maybe. I don't know, but it's not something I'm not artistic in any way. Not like I can't draw or anything like that, and I have no idea what colors look good together, and I'm really, really bad at all of that. But I've had to learn it, because I used to say, make sure the numbers are right. That's the most important thing. Don't worry about all the I don't want to waste time with the colors and the formatting and all that. But it's I realize that people don't pay attention to your numbers if you don't make it look good. So I think that's an important point.
And I myself am probably more of a salesperson. So I think of that first, actually.
Okay.
I think of the technical stuff. I think about, how do I get this accepted? First. And I actually put it from that angle a little bit.
I mean, the numbers obviously have to be right, but if nobody pays attention to them, the model can be as fantastic as you like.
No, agreed. Okay, so if we were going to move on, let's say, I guess, how do you learn it? What's the best way to learn financial modeling?
Get in there, start modeling.
Okay. But let's say most jobs, though, most accountant jobs.
You can read a book.
That's right. Apparently there's a couple of really good books.
But the best way, I found it hard to actually sit down and write about it because it's a practical thing. You've got to do it. And the prospective employer does not care how many books you've read.
Or certificates you've got.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a trainer. Like, I sell training courses. That's, the majority of what I do. But like, yes, a training course will certainly help you do your job better and teach you the skills. But when you get into an interview and they say, so can you build a financial model, or, tell me about your financial model skills, and you say, well, I went on this, I read this book, and I went on a training course and I learned about this and this and this. They don't care. They don't want to hear that. They just want to know, can you apply it to your work, and have you actually built a model? Do you actually know how to build one in Excel? And if you haven't got a job, it's quite hard to do that. So if you have got a job, I'd say the best way to learn is to just take any opportunity to build a model. So like, if there's any problem that you're facing at work, being able to build a model, like a structure in Excel, doesn't need to be a fully fledged, three-way financial model. But, just if you're like, let's say you're trying to figure out the roster for your kid's soccer team or something, not that anyone's playing soccer, or, like any kind of problem that you've got, and try to solve it using Excel, those are going to be really good skills to get, going forward. So I think that's probably the best way to learn it. But yeah, certainly there's some techniques and things that you should learn, but a lot of it is really just common sense, and you get in there and you make mistakes, and that's just the best way to learn.
And I think a lot of it is just finding out what you don't know, which means often in your own company, it could just mean asking somebody, can I look at that model and understand it?
Yeah, or looking at other people's models. That's a really good place.
And I've learned most of my stuff from looking at other people's models that I didn't realize. I don't necessarily say that. Also, I didn't know that. If it was a situation where I came in as the expert and I didn't know how to do something.
Google it.
Yeah, but look, once you find out you can do something, you can Google it, you can do a course, or you can find out more about it. But most of the stuff I've learned is like, oh, I didn't know I could do that.
I've learned, when I first started, I learned from people that I'd never met before. I just looked at, when I inherited somebody else's model at a company, and you just take it apart and go, oh, that's an interesting way of doing it. And you sort of learn different techniques and ways of going about things.
And what happens is you find you can improve that model in your own way as well. So if I was in a role, I will often talk about how I could improve something. And I think that's important, that communication line, to talk about how you could improve something. But also, I have been asked in the past to show a model that I built in an interview. Actually bring it in my computer and show them something. So obviously there's confidentiality clauses and stuff, but I built this model under a non-disclosure agreement up to a certain time. So I could always show that after a certain time. So, but then, as I said, you can always hide the company names and do things, but show your expertise. I would often do that if you feel like you're very good at it as well. But then there's also the languaging. We're talking about the languaging of how you explain, modeling. Are there certain features that people expect a financial modeler to know, or certain words or certain types of things that they say that would highlight that person?
Yeah, I think when you get into the interview, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. I just had some trouble with my headphones. I think when you get into the interview, I think the language that you use, they can really tell that you know what you're talking about. There's the way that you describe it, and it's not a bad idea to have I used to have like models, it's so much work to put together, but to sanitize the model and take out anything confidential, so that you can then just have it on a USB that you can just not probably give it to them, but just to show them some examples of the kind of models that you've built. Make sure they're your own work, of course.
Yeah. And I think this is also a plus, because even if they
Mm.
don't ask for that in the interview,
Yeah.
if you have that, you can show them. I think that's a huge plus, because here's the thing. People don't really know in an interview if you're good or not. The questions are all designed to try to suss it out, and then compare people who have different answers.
And they might test you. You've got to be prepared for that.
They might test you, yeah. And because my business at the moment is not so much financial modeling and consulting. It's actually teaching people how to find jobs. I teach people how to interview and write their resume and such. And one thing I teach people is, how do you answer a question they never even asked, which they should have asked if they knew better. And this is the way.
That's a good point.
Actually bring in. See, I've got something. I'll show you. I have a second monitor.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, most people get a laptop and they, but I can just flip this to the other person and mirror it, and they can see it without looking uncomfortable and do everything. Because as a consultant, this actually earned me a lot of recognition as well, because it's like, oh, yeah, this guy's a professional. He's got a second monitor. He can show us instead of trying to turn the thing around to show things. Little things like this that show that you're a professional. You're comfortable with showing people things. You're good at explaining things. You understand the technical side, and then you understand the presentation side. And to me, this is where I found I'm not just an analyst getting a job. I become a consultant who goes in and trouble fixes or creates something from scratch for them, or fixes a existing model. And I've gone and fixed Deloitte's, Deloitte's a big company. Someone paid, recently I worked on something where someone paid $90,000 for Deloitte to do a model. And I think it was completely useless. I thought it became a white elephant, literally. And I ended up creating my own model instead of that one, which more people was going to use. It was going to be more accurate and not so complex, right?
Yeah.
So that was my perspective on it.
Yeah, I often hear stories like that.
Yeah. So, paying a big four company to spend, pay a sort of mid-level analyst $200, $300 an hour for his work, and accumulate $90,000 in the bill. That's not really the best way. If you can bring some of this stuff to the table, they'd rather pay you $90,000.
Can save them so much money. Have you ever had a model? Have you ever been involved in a model audit? So where they've actually taken apart the model that you've built or someone else has built?
Well, I've taken apart their model. Maybe not so much because part of my job is actually assess this model. And that's why I built my own model in the end, because it was just it was a huge white elephant, I felt. But in terms of someone else taking my model, they've asked me to test it often. Put some inputs, do something, look at a project we already did and see what we would have said we would have done at the end. So we've audited it that way.
Yep.
In terms of other ways, just hacking it apart and seeing it work.
Because if you're involved in like a big, like if it's generally for a big infrastructure project or something where or like if they're going to spend multi-million-dollar project and if they're going to lend you millions of dollars to go ahead with something, often one of the conditions of the bank will be that the model needs to be audited by a third party, so not as a modeler, so someone else will audit it, and so one of those big consultancies would do it, and we're talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars to audit that model. So it might, somebody internally might have done it, and it might only cost them a small, $10,000-$20,000 to build the model, but to audit it is huge. And there's a couple of things that you can do to make that audit process better or quicker and easier for the when you're actually building the model. And one of those things is to have consistent formulas. So using the dollar signs, when you use the F4 shortcut and you actually use
anchoring.
You know what I mean by that, don't you? Where you have one single formula and you can copy it all the way across and all the way down. So that's just one formula. So that means that it's going to be a lot easier to audit because it's a single formula rather than because often you find people will, even like quite experienced Excel users would, do different formulas in different cells rather than copying it all the way across and all the way down. So things like that, just really simple.
There is a lot of best practice stuff. I mean, in answer to that, one thing I have done is I might do a model for buying a different company. Right? Yeah. And it might say $50 million, we're going to pay this for this company. But to do the $50 million deal, they need to make sure it's right. So then they will take the model and give it to a PwC or a big four, which is responsible for the overall transaction, but also look at your model and just make sure you check that your numbers do make sense, that this is the value they should be paid. Maybe they'll actually change it, but that's one way that they would do it. So the internal guy is still building the model. It's just that it's checked later on by once the transaction is sort of decided, okay, we're going to proceed and try to do due diligence and maybe pay one of these big four $1 million to help with the transaction. So that's one area which I found that, yes, your model gets audited by that area. So it's important to make sure your model is good. There are I've even researched this. One of the companies I worked with recently was doing a big tender. It was a huge tender, and part of the tender was trying to get finance, a lot of millions of dollars of finance to be part of this tender, and then work with a big four company whilst you're doing the model to get the result. So I think it's good to know a little bit about the best practice. I haven't always found that when I looked up best practice, it was always, to me, best practice. My opinion of best practice was different from theirs.
Yeah, and a lot of it's pretty much just common sense. Yeah.
But I think as long as people follow certain decent rules, like having a formula where you don't have to go on this month here, you have to put put a manual number in, right? So the formula is consistent and set this number at 1,000. So if someone goes in then puts plus 1,000, that is not good. That's not the best practice, definitely. So Danielle, other things about people who want to become successful as a good financial modeler, a good analyst. Let's just say they know a little bit about it. They might have worked in finance. They might be an accountant. They do a few spreadsheets. What are the steps that these people you think need to take to become successful at it?
You mean somebody who is in a job already, or somebody who's looking for a job?
Who might have had some experience in there. Maybe they're in a job already. Maybe they're looking for a job. They almost want to move into a different area. So instead of being more accountant or just knowing a little bit and doing some stuff on spreadsheets, to really want to become a financial modeler, which I call more sexy. I don't know about you. I think it's more sexy.
I don't think it's sexy.
Financial modeler. Yeah. Financial, like being more of an analyst and being more commercial, I guess. Yeah. Being more involved in the business rather than just doing reports, maybe.
So you mean, how do they become successful?
Yeah. What steps should they take if they know some about Excel, but they don't know too much yet, or they want to know more? They want to call themselves a financial modeler rather than a financial accountant, or maybe just an analyst, or junior business analyst or business analyst. They want to become recognized as a modeler. What steps? I mean, obviously you've got your courses, which is a good step.
But I mean, there's just practice, and to just make sure that you feel confident that you could take on any situation or any type of financial model. It's really just practical. So do you think
it's just also doing a course or talking to the manager and saying I want to get involved? How have you found is the best way for someone who, let's say, it's a sideways shift, but also go upwards?
Yeah.
Like a lot of analyst jobs which really don't tax your Excel skills, do they?
So they sort of do, but I found there's certain types of people will become good at Excel, and it's not about the role, it's about the person. And some people I've sort of come across people who just have that natural curiosity, and people will kind of get, like, they'll find a way to, particularly analysts, they'll find a way to do something, and they'll just keep doing it that way. They'll just do day in, day out. They just keep doing the same thing because it works, and it might take them all day to do something, but they know it works and they'll just keep doing it. And they haven't got that curiosity to just go, okay, there's got to be an easier way of doing this, and just setting aside the time, maybe just staying, heaven forbid, maybe staying an hour late one night just to figure it out, or, doing it after hours to figure out, do a bit of research and figure out what is the best. Is there a better way of doing this? Maybe I should be building a macro. Should I be doing this using Power Query, or just find other ways of doing it, and to have that constant curiosity. Those sorts of people I find do really well because their technical skills build up and up and up and up. So there's kind of two ways of being successful in your career and also as a financial modeler. There's your technical skills, and those are probably the easiest. Well, easiest, they're not easy, but like it's just a matter of working on your technical skills, just constantly trying to make your skills better. And there are lots of resources that you can use to do that, and having that curiosity to check it out. The other side of things, of course, is those soft skills, things like business skills, the presentation skills, being able to, that sort of finance business partnering type skills where you can make people, you can influence people, people will trust your numbers, they'll trust you, that sort of thing.
Okay. And I also found this, this is my experience, and maybe this is just because what I've done is, if I can find a better way to do something, better way to create a report, better way to do something, and then propose that, almost do it and says, look, I can do this better. Part of what I guess I've done is just got curious, like you said, get curious about something, and then say, oh, look, I do this better than the way that we're doing it, and actually do it and show them, and then say, okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, let's do that now. I think that, number one, impresses people. Number two, it gives you a bit of a reputation that you are good at Excel and you can do some stuff. And what happens is then you become known as the expert in this area, and that will drive you to learn more and find out more and ask more questions, and even do courses to find out what you can do, which you didn't know. So that's number one. Number two, I actually find personally, and I'm not sure if this is the same with you, is I find creating a financial model is a little bit of programming, knowing, it's almost like thinking like a programmer. That's what I find in Excel. It's like thinking about, this happens and this happens. It's like writing words of code. Sometimes writing a formula is a little bit like writing a program, isn't it?
It is.
And then
it is.
you're creating
it
a sheet.
is.
It's almost
You are
like
programming basically when you're.
It's like, if this happens, then subroutine down here, go to this part of the spreadsheet. If this happens, go over here and get onto another sheet, and then pull this number out. So it's a little bit like a programming thinking, but with numbers, with a different type of software. And even, I guess you could say macros, not that I'm expert on macros, but when I was young, I learned BASIC a little bit, a computer BASIC. And obviously we've got Visual BASIC now. But BASIC is a programming language, which says, if this happens, do this, start this loop and all this other stuff.
We've got a couple of people with their hands up. Does that mean
okay.
Does that mean they want to contribute, or they're having some problems?
So, all right, those people with your hands up, maybe just type in the chat. So I see. Okay.
Someone on the phone, I think.
Okay, so look, so the number on the phone number, I'll put it down on chat. So just put, just tell us what you want to ask. So I'll just put your name down. Someone put their name down as soon as we said that. Tell us what you want to ask.
And Rajesh wanted to know if we've got some demos or examples. Not a massive amount. I when I was talking about best practice, I do actually have a very short online course that's free, which talks about best practice. So, and I do have lots of demos on that. So I'm just going to pop the link to that there.
Okay. So you got a free course.
Yeah, that's just it's called 7 Days of Financial Modeling Best Practice. So every day for 7 days, you get a very short video on a point of best practice in financial modeling. We do things like, the dollar signs that I talked about. So that's got lots of technical examples there. I have got an example of a model I might show you a little later on if we get into that.
Okay. So it's the person on the phone, because they're on the phone. So if you still want to ask a question, just stay on. We might put you on speaker in a minute. If you think we can, because obviously you can't type in the chat, maybe because you're on the phone.
You could, can you unmute that person and see if they want to ask?
All right. So look, just leave your hand up for a minute. We might just answer this other Q&A question. Any tips for building a model of historics that is a new entity? What are your thoughts on that, Danielle?
Yeah, it's harder, certainly harder. Normally you've got some sort of historics to go by and you would use that going forward. For a new entity. I mean, it's really just, I've done a lot of that. This is I would love that. I would love it if someone says, I've got a brand new situation. I want you to build a model from scratch. That doesn't usually happen. They say, I've got this model and it's not working, and you have to inherit somebody else's model. But I'd be like a kid in a candy store if somebody says, I've got a brand new model, we've got to build something from scratch. So it's really just sitting down and saying, what's our revenue? Understanding the drivers underneath the revenue. So how does it come up? And then you come up with your revenue lines. What are your costs? And you could even use a template of an old model and say, with the costings, we normally would start with the P&L probably. So what's your, what does your profit and loss look like? So you've got your income, you've got your expenses, and then you'd look at each line item, what's your general administrative expenses? What are your staff? How many staff have you got? Just working it through line by line and coming up with a model. It's almost like, it's like building a budget basically, to get an idea of the company. So I hope that answers your question, Katie.
Cool. My answer to that would be, I have actually been asked to do this quite a bit, build a model from scratch. Let's just say it's a new business and they want to see if it's going to work, or maybe, we take on a new business and then how much is it worth if we're going to sell it. So part of it is understanding businesses, but also part of it is understanding maybe a like business to me. So how would a similar business, how could I take this similar structure and adapt it to this new thing? So it doesn't mean that I get the numbers from that industry, but it may give me an idea of how something might ramp up, because when something's new, the biggest thing is, how does it going to increase? Is it going to increase? And I've got involved in a lot of startup pitches where I've assessed startup businesses without having looked at the spreadsheets. They might put a slide with some numbers in, and I'm mentally going through, is this realistic or not? So taking experience from other experiences, taking experience from other industries or other companies, but understanding business. What I mean by understanding business is, somebody says they're going to sell this much in a year or two's time. You've got to think, are they really going to sell this? What is it really the cost of selling it? Is it something that can be easily explained and everyone will snap up? Or is it like a long sales cycle? I'll give you an example. So not that I do anything like this, but multi-level marketing, I think about that and I'm thinking, why do they use multi-level marketing? It's because you can't put it on the shelf at that price that they're selling on for, and people will say, I'm going to buy that. You almost have to sell it with a long, to sell it at the price that you have it at. You're going to have to turn people into salesmen who deliver long pitches. They explain the product, but almost you've got to buy something else other than the product, right? So that way you understand the sales process of how something ramps up. So, so understanding enough about business to predict numbers well, that to everybody who wants to sell their business, anybody who wants to do a deal are usually over optimistic on their numbers. Startups will say they're going to get 2%, they're going to get 10% of the market. Well, realistically, most startups, you want to go from like 1% of the market or 0.5% of the market.
They're usually very entrepreneurs are usually very optimistic by nature.
And executives, they want to do the deal. They really, I found that a lot of people, and sometimes you work for them and you can't always, do it, but they like to think the numbers are going to do this, right? Where really the numbers are going to do this, right?
Yeah.
And you have to find that compromise of,
or do this.
Yeah. They think it's going to do this, and then they can sell it at $15 million, right? And knowing enough about business and numbers, you know it's not going to happen. So I think understanding other businesses, understanding business in general, understanding from experience what's happened. Most acquisitions, they never end up with the numbers that they predict. Never. Pretty much ever.
And that's why it's important to do scenarios. So you've got your,
yes,
normally it's the best case scenario,
yeah.
and then you've got your base case scenario, and then maybe a worst case scenario. So that's part of the model building process. You would always have some kind of scenario analysis at the end.
So what I might do is I'll unmute this person with the number of 872. I'm not sure what country code that is. So I'm going to allow you to talk. So I'm going to put you on. So you're on, and I'm going to...
I think they're still muted.
Panelists, is that the way it works?
Yeah, you just need to unmute him or her.
They need to unmute. I think I can't unmute them.
Oh, you can't unmute?
Yep,
okay.
I can unmute. Hold on. I'll unmute you. Didn't work.
In the top right hand corner, you should be able to, the three dots, and just unmute.
It's not working. Maybe I have to promote you to panelist for a second. Okay, so still allowed to talk. All right. So yeah, still not working for me.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe they can send us a message later.
Yeah. So I promote you to do panelist, and it hasn't worked. I'm allowed to talk, and it hasn't worked. So we'll be rejoining as a panelist. So, all right. When you do rejoin, or you do join as a panelist, I tried to click allow to talk, but it's not seems to be working.
I think it's when you come through on the phone, it's kind of tricky. Yeah,
maybe it's different. Okay, so let's continue. So we've answered the questions. Some people put in a chat box, totally agree, currently balanced interest executive and accurate new entity model. Someone said, as an accountant, what is the best way for me to start with the basics and gain a better understanding and progress to an advanced financial modeler?
I mean, as an accountant, you've got a pretty good head start because you kind of understand the way a model hangs together, which is great. I was going to, one thing I haven't mentioned is this exam that you can do. It's a fairly new qualification that's been around for a couple of years. So that's something you might consider, Adam, because it's, the thing is with the financial modeling, it's like, oh yeah, I can build a financial model. Yes, I'm a financial model. And people, it's hard to tell like how good you really are as a modeler. And so it's always, there's never really been a sort of standardized qualification until now. They've brought out a qualification. It's called the Financial Modeling Institute. It's actually a physical face-to-face exam. You have to build a full set of financial statements in 4 hours. So you have to turn up at the exam centre. The next one is coming up in October. So they are run in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth in Australia, and there's about 30 other locations all over the world where you can attend a testing centre and actually sit the exam. If you like, I can share my screen and show you what the model that you have to build would look like. And so I think if you can build a model like that, nobody can dispute that you are a financial modeler, that you know what you're talking about. So if you pass that exam, it's tough. It is not easy. Only about 40% of people who sit the exam actually pass it. And most people don't pass it because they haven't put in enough preparation and they just simply run out of time. Because you've got to build like debt schedule, like do a revolver debt schedule, you've got to do all the tax calculations, you've got to do depreciation schedule, working capital schedule, and pull all of that through. So if you're serious about being a financial modeler, you could consider doing that exam.
Okay. And from my perspective, to answer that question, and this is something I have found, a lot of accountants want to become modelers. I'm going to take a different angle on this. The first angle is a little bit like IT people, if they want to get out of and become more senior and become management and be able to progress beyond the technical IT side. To me, an accountant is a little bit more of a technician, and to become an analyst is a little bit more, I say, commercial, understanding businesses, dealing with managers, becoming business partners and such. Excuse me. The one thing I would do is actually, I might do something like this. I would actually tell people to dress a little bit better, to tell them that this
Doesn't
is the
hurt.
job you
Does
want.
not hurt.
Because here's the thing. I have an image of an accountant, and I'm not an accountant, but I have worked in a lot of finance areas. So I become the in-between between finance and, let's say, senior management, executive, and CFOs and CEOs. I have to take that language and communicate it to these guys, because those guys don't quite understand the accountant maybe, or the IT person in their language. But it's just almost like conveying that I want to be there. I want to be that personality, dress a little bit better. And I guess a lot of it is just asking questions and volunteering for stuff. I mean, this is a funny thing that I did when I was a junior, my first graduate role. I learned a bit of Excel, and I said, and the company, which was Avis Rent-A-Car, would hire some people to do courses. One of them was Excel, and I did the course. It was free because the company paid for it. And I said, I think I can do this course better. So I actually created my own course, right? Now, the people weren't necessarily high level, so my stuff wasn't complicated, but it was new to them. And it was stuff that they could do and they could learn, and it was stuff that could be applied for this company. Volunteering to help do things and putting your hand up and says, I think I can do this better. I can do this. I think that's one way of saying that I'm an analyst. I'm a financial modeler. I'm not just an accountant. Dress better, look them in the eye, practice some social skills, do a lot more sales skills, prepare that.
There is a lot to be said for that.
Do graphs on your spreadsheets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, something simple as doing a graph on your spreadsheet is actually telling people that you're not just an accountant. You're thinking about the business. You're thinking about presenting this stuff. So just that mind shift. And surprisingly, most accountants, you can't get to do that. I almost find I have to deprogram accountants to become analysts a little bit too often. That's my experience on it. Having said that, there's a lot of people who successfully do that. In fact, probably half the analysts or most of the analysts and financial modelers were accountants once upon a time.
Yeah, on that, I definitely agree about the dressing the part. It makes you feel better as well. So even though I've got my UGG boots on to wear a jacket,
and I've got no shoes on.
That you take the situation seriously. You haven't just kind of rolled out of bed and and it's hard to especially in this, when you don't actually leave the house to dress the part, to look the part, but also to. Some people don't value it, and to not look down on people who don't dress as well as you, of course.
Well, that's true, yeah. But it's almost like breaking the stereotype in my mind. Sometimes I need to break the stereotype, because when I teach people resumes, it's almost like you got 7.4 seconds before this guy decides his resume is a fail. I'll put it in the bin. So what can you do in that 7.4 seconds? Well, if you convey an image by what you write and who you are, and maybe the fact that you got no experience in, and a lot of people from overseas coming to an English-speaking country will complain that they keep asking for local experience. They're not necessarily asking for local experience. They're like asking for a culture that is not a do-as-you're-told culture, and hold back and don't upset your boss and just wait and don't speak up in meetings. That's the culture they want to get rid of. So the other side is, show that you've got social skills, and, if you break that circuit by simply the way you volunteer and communicate with people and get involved and dress, that helps a lot on getting that foot up. And you said, thank you. So
we have another question,
yes.
I think. So an anonymous. What do you think about the CFI? Well, if I was talking about CFI, I'd go anonymous as well. No, I'm just kidding. CFI is basically the competitor to FMI. So FMI is the Financial Modelling Institute. CFI is the Corporate Finance Institute. So they are, from a financial modelling perspective, I guess, competition. So they're certifications. So the CFI, I think, runs the FMVA, which is Financial Modelling and Valuations, which I've heard very good things about as well. So the CFI runs a similar qualification. I haven't done that one though, but from what I hear, it's a really good program. So with the FMI, the Financial Modelling Institute, they basically, you do an exam and you prepare on your own, and you just get thrown into the exam like you are in the real world, and you have to build a model. That's it. No kind of preparation. Like, they give you some content, like what you need to know, but basically, here's a template, here's some historical data, and you need to build a model. Whereas with the CFI, it's all online, and so they give you all the content. So it's all videos. They tell you what to do. You have to answer the quizzes. So it's very sort of drip fed, I think. So it's quite, if you like that style, if you want to kind of learn and be told what to do, in my opinion, I think the FMI is better respected, I suppose, because it's a physical exam. Like, you can't fudge it. You have to be there in person, and you have to, so that because it's quite stringent and really hard, it's got quite a good reputation, whereas having an online exam is perhaps not quite got the same cachet. And it's also very North American focused, whereas the FMI is a bit more global, like it's all over. So I do have a preference for FMI, because I'm on the advisory board actually for FMI, and I run a preparation I'm an approved training provider, and I run a preparation course that helps people to prepare for the exam. You don't have to do a course. You can just go in, and if you know what you're doing, you just jump in and can sit the exam without any preparation at all, or you can do preparation courses. And I'm launching an online course at the moment. I'm building it at the moment to help people prepare for that. So I was been meaning to do it for ages, and just now with the lockdown, I've actually got time to sit down and actually do the recording. Yeah.
I think even because if you know your Excel, you can do an exam in this case. But the fact is, sometimes you still need a little bit course. Sometimes you need to be told. You need a bit of practice too.
Yeah.
Because I remember I did a GMAT, which was for an MBA. This was years ago.
Oh yeah.
And technically, it's a little bit like you can't. It's not. You can't guess the questions.
You
it's
didn't
not
have to do the GMAT. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I did, because I applied for certain unis which required it.
Okay.
I think the universities I applied to required a GMAT. But you could do practice questions. You could do practice.
Okay.
You could buy books that gave you practice tests, and that just helped you do it. And I got in, and I got the mark. I did a little bit at the MBA, but I thought, oh, this is not very practical, as my perspective, and I didn't continue. But I did feel like doing those practice things, a little bit like the course, teaching you what it's going to cover and how to prepare for it, especially because it's a knowledge-based one, where the GMAT wasn't knowledge-based. I didn't feel like I would have done as well without doing some sort of preparation for it. Even though maybe I think like my financial modeler, I guess I would probably fail that test that you talked about.
Oh, if you went in cold, yeah, definitely.
I went in cold, yeah, I would fail it.
But you totally, like, if you could prepare and practice, you'd be fine. It's all in the preparation, basically. With that, when I did it, I practiced and I over practiced, and I finished it very quickly.
Okay.
Which meant that I had to sit there for another 2.5 hours and wait for the finish.
I did it an hour and a half. Okay, so it's a 4-hour test.
Yeah.
Okay, so is a question here. There's a couple of questions people typed in the chat. So if you have a specific question, also type in the Q&A box. So I'll answer the Q&A first. General career tips. What's been your biggest failure, and how did you come back? Danielle, do you want to answer that?
I was going to say, you go first.
Okay.
Oh, career failure. I don't know.
Look,
I think probably at the moment it's been the worst, probably the hardest time of my whole career, because I'm a trainer. I get on planes for a living. That's what I do. I was supposed to be in London this week. And my whole world is about traveling, and not being able to do that has been quite horrible. But I've had to find other things to do. So I've always do lots of different things. I do a lot of consulting as well. So I've been doing loads of consulting, and it's given me a chance to do this online course. But it's certainly been a challenging time. Another failure maybe was, in terms of technical work was, when you've built a budget or something, and then you like you know, those sort of situations where you make mistakes and you learn, like the time when I was working for an aged care industry, and I built the budget and in one template, and then I said, you know, are you happy with it? Is that how it's going to be? And I didn't sort of think about all the changes that would need to be made, and so we copied it, you know, 40 times, sent it out to everyone. The client says, oh, can we change that, you know? And of course I should have seen that coming, and then having to make all the changes and having to do that using VBA, I suppose. That can, you know, just trying to think in advance, I suppose, of what the client is going to say or your boss is going to say. And yeah, I don't know if that's a failure.
Okay. I mean, look, I'll tell you one of mine, and this
Yeah.
is a little bit businessy and a little bit, you know, financy. I did a project with a very large company. You know, this has had hundreds of thousands of employees, and I was part of a project to try to improve something. And from the first week, I saw, you know, something didn't quite, like, why don't you just do this instead? I had a thought about the business side. But they had a process, which is, you know, if you look at project management, there's the old waterfall style and there's the agile method. The waterfall style is you plan everything in advance, you follow stages. At the end, you produce your result and try to get it adopted. The agile style is do something and test it and ask questions and see if that's what they really want, and then change it if you need to, and then improve it as you go along. From the first week, I thought, this doesn't make sense. This is not really the right way to find out how things are working on how things could be improved. But they went through all that, and I think my thing was I lost a little bit of drive on it. I didn't look to improve anything. I felt like, it's not really going to make much difference anyway. And in the end, most of the team got laid off because in a way, mentally, I was right. You know, when it got presented, I sat next to the guy who was a director who was actually going to, who was presented to, but I never spoke to him at that project. So he wasn't part of the team. And it's almost like, well, why didn't they just do this instead of trying to say, this is how you measure something, when it really wouldn't show that anyway. So I felt like all my analytical ability and skills, and I probably copped a little bit from that project as well, because I was not demonstrating enough interest and activity. So I think my answer to that, and my answer of how do I come back, is I've just got to decide early on, do I want to continue here or not? And also, I might have spoken up a bit more and driven a little bit more. Instead, I just looked at it as a big company, and this is the way they want to do stuff, and I let it go.
I think that self-reflection is really important when you're in a situation and you think that didn't go as well as it should have, and think, what could I have done differently? Yeah.
And sometimes to me, that was more integrity. It's almost like I should have just quit, or I should have raised something, and then, you know, because I think in a career, one can get a little bit selfish. It's like, I don't want to look like I'm like this or like that. But the reality is, it didn't necessarily harm my career, because I don't use that example as, you know, me doing something well. It wasn't technically in financial modeling and other areas. I just wanted the experience in that type of industry, in that sort of company, which I hadn't had, because the industry was quite unique, and it was a big company. I mean, I don't know how many levels, you know, there was a few $100,000. There's 3,000 people in the office itself, in the head office itself. So it was quite a large organization. And I think I should have spoken up. I guess if I projected out, if I spoken up and raised some things, maybe other things would have opened up when most of the team got disbanded. And some of these guys got disbanded, even though they've been working, like let go, even though they've been working there for a couple of decades. So it was like, oh, you know, it doesn't pay just to keep quiet, I think, and not follow what you actually believe commercially is the right thing to do. So that's sort of my answer. There's a whole bunch of questions that come through in chat as well. Someone's saying that they want to see an example of a model.
Oh yeah. Shall I show that? Yeah.
You want to do that? Yep. And I'll just keep talking while you're doing that. You share your screen. How advanced do you need to be in Excel or VBA? Do you need for financial modeling? My answer to that, look, VBA is something I've done, but not necessarily learned. I worked stuff out as I went along. Most modelers, I don't think, know VBA. Would you agree? They know how to record and maybe edit some macros.
Yeah, it's not a. It's. I think you do need to know a little bit of VBA, but you need enough to go around. But a lot of what we used to use VBA for, you can now do in Power Query. So if you're learning, if you don't know VBA at all, I'd probably just know a little bit to kind of get by. But I would invest my time in Power Query and Power BI instead. I wouldn't I don't think you need to become a super VBA programmer in your job. I think you should just have a little bit, just sort of practice recording a macro, looking at the code, just some really simple things is sufficient.
Okay. So you're showing
you can see my screen now?
I can see a screen. Yeah.
Cool. So this is the when you get into the exam on exam day, you're on computers, and this is what you have. It's just a simple model that looks like that. So you've got your P&L, you've got your cash flow, and you've got your balance sheet, and that's it. That's all you're given. You've got no access to the internet. It's really, really strict. No outside materials, no smartphone, no watch, anything like that. And you have to build so you have to project out for 5 years. So you get a piece of paper that tells you what you need to do, and you need to go out for 5 years from now and build and link it all through together. And so when you're finished, this is actually a different example, but it will look something like this. Can you see the other models that I'm showing now?
No.
So you're still seeing the same model?
Seeing the same model, yeah. Is this separate screen you're on, is it?
Okay. Yeah, I'm on a different model now. Can you see Henderson Manufacturing? No. You can't see that.
No, see LNC Manufacturing.
Okay, I might need to.
I'll
just share it again so you can see the other one. So you can see Henderson now?
Yep. I can see Financial Modeling Institute, Henderson Manufacturing, yes.
Yeah, so this is a completed model now. It's a different case study, but this is what the model would look like when you finished it. So the financial statement, so that's sort of what you were given. You had 3 years of historicals, and you have to go out for 5 years. But in order to do that, you have to build all of these other schedules. So you need to build an assumptions tab, you need scenarios, or you do scenarios at the end. You need to calculate the revenue, the cost of sales. So you'd look at the historical revenue and then use those drivers going forward. You'd need to calculate the depreciation schedule. So you sort of you need to do a waterfall depreciation. You need to do the tax calculation, and there's always some kind of tricky thing with the tax you need to work out. You work out the working capital, so work out the accounts receivable days, the accounts payable days, the debtor days, and then pull that through onto the balance sheet so you can work out the working capital and the change in working capital. You would then do a debt, and you also, I don't know if you've come across this, Dick, where you get the circular reference in a financial model. So you get, so usually when you've got your P&L, has got your interest in it, and the P&L drives the cash flow, and the cash flow drives your debt, and the debt drives your interest, and the interest drives your P&L, and your P&L drives your cash flow. So you end up with a big fat circular reference, which causes a few problems. And so in this model, you have a few options to get around it. One of the options we do is using a macro. So it's just literally really simple, like I just described, where you record, paste values, stop recording. That's it. And this is not one of my models. This is one of the examples that they give you. When you hit the button, it will recalculate and paste the value so that you break that loop. So every time you run the model, you have to run the
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You need to calculate the equity, and then you might do some covenants at the end as well. And then when you finished it, you need to create scenarios, and that's sort of the last thing. So when you change, so you have a drop-down box, you change it to base case, you change it to worst case, and all of the inputs change and everything flows through. So you need to go from that first sheet that I showed you to this in 4 hours. So that's sort of like a fairly detailed financial model. And if you can do that, you get to call yourself an AFM, an advanced financial modeler, and nobody can dispute that you know what you're talking about when you go into your next job interview.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Obviously, you have to create a lot more sheets, and it is logical once you understand it. There's a logical flow to it. I must admit, the circular reference, sometimes what I do is I calculate by iteration.
You can do that,
which is
yeah.
like doing it. But sometimes it goes wrong.
Yeah, I don't
and
like
it's
doing
quite fiddly.
in the exam they say you can do that, but I just find that, as you say, sometimes it allows other circular references, which can just be bad news. Yeah,
you have to be a little bit careful on it. Another thing, if you build it by month and you offset the cash way it falls, it could work that way, right? So anyway, I won't go into the details of it, but yeah, person can get creative on things. And I think one of the skills of a good financial modeler is they can think of different ways of doing it based on the experience. But this is what I mean by programmer. Sometimes you run into a bug and it's almost like how to get around this bug. It's like you got to think like, what is causing the bug? How do I get around it? How do I find a lot of stuff I'm doing in a model is never something I've never done before. It's a new creative activity that I'm doing, which is why I think Excel is so good, because it requires that almost a unique model every time, and everyone does it somewhat uniquely, and some people do better than others. But there's almost like a creative stamp on it. Maybe it's not the language thing that's the best. It's a creative model. I've also put a couple of websites on. One is Danielle's Plum Solutions. I accidentally pasted my one. I say accidentally because I was trying to get something else. I teach people on getting a job, and I'm updating a course myself, which I'll put up. But I've got a couple of free videos on there to teach you how to build your skills. And so, Danielle, I think you've answered that last Q&A question. Were there any other questions? We got
Adam has asked if we could share, if I could share that information for Henderson, that model that I showed. That's actually publicly available on. I don't know, Dick, I'm not able to flick between my Chrome for some reason, but if you could go to the FMI Institute. So Financial Modelling Institute, and they've got and I think it's /learning. They've got a lot of the models that you can download. So that's all freely available. So that's all to help you prepare for the exam. So whether or not you're planning to go for the exam, you can certainly download all of the learning materials and just see whether you think you could pass it.
So you want me to show the screen?
Yes.
Or you want to actually download a model?
Or just put the link in there. I can't, my Chrome is just not working.
All right, so let me share the screen. So share the screen, I'll put this one here. Share, so, okay, so this is the...
Yeah, that's it, that's the page.
FMI, so the body of knowledge, skills checklist, sample exam.
So it's fminstitute.com/learning.
Learning, yeah, which is what's up here. You can see that.
Melissa has shared an eloquence model. Yes, I think that one is done. That was a model built by Lance Rubin, who's also a approved training provider for FMI. So that's a really good option as well. So have a look at that link that Melissa's put in there also.
I'll paste it in the chat box as well. So if anyone...
yeah, Melissa's put it in there. Oh, yes. Yeah, I think Melissa's put it in there already.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
So I'm sharing the screen at the moment, which is the FMI Institute Learning. Everyone can see.
Yep. And can you share the link I sent you earlier on the course, the preparation, on my preparation course? I think I emailed it to you this afternoon. If you go to the home tab of Plum Solutions,
okay. So let me have
on your other tab, go to the other tab there, yep, and then go to online training.
Yeah.
And drop down the second one where it says FMI, that one. Yeah, if you go to that one, that's the course that I'm building at the moment. So it's under construction right now. So the first couple of videos are already available, but we're doing a pre-launch special. So you basically get it for half price. So I think it's about $550 normally, the prep course. Yeah, so you can see some of them are already available and some of them are coming. So
and the exams in October. So
in
definitely
October, yes, you got plenty of time to get ready. And I think there's the half price thing. I think there's a couple of spots left. So we just were there was a certain number left, and we still got a few available for that. So that's something you can consider. But certainly have a look at the online resources that are available on FMI first, and the Eloquence model as well, and see what's out there. And then if you feel like you need a bit of extra help, you might want to think about doing the course to help you prepare. And if you're quick, you'll get one of the half price spots.
Okay, great.
I haven't even told my network about this yet, Dick.
Yeah,
so I haven't.
Everyone's getting in ahead.
I know, because I haven't announced it yet, because we've only just done the first release on Friday, basically.
Okay.
So I wanted to wait until I was a bit like I had a few more videos available before I announced it to everybody. So FMI announced it the other day. So most of the half price spots got taken already, but there are a couple left.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, so I think that's good. I think what I'll do is here. This is just my website, just quickly. So I've got a book with Richard Branson, Brian Tracy, Les Brown. This is useful, teaching people how to sell themselves into a job. One of the biggest tips that I give. And I've got a course which I am editing, and it's sort of released, but I'm actually doing some changes to it. So if you want, you can view courses. I'm actually going to change the link to this course. So the course that you see is not going to be the final course. So I think we're just over time now. So Danielle's Plum Solutions website, the Financial Modeling Institute materials, my course, that those who are interested, you can also get in touch with me. My email is on, or you can contact me through the email here. Contact Danielle. I've got an event Thursday. Anyways, it's going to be completely different. It's actually
what have you got on Thursday?
Thursday is I'm teaching people how to become a coach. I've got a friend of mine who coached on speaking, because I'm a speaking trainer as well, believe it or not. And this guy coached when he was an optometrist a couple of years ago. And now he's become really, really successful. And he's teaching other coaches how to become successful as well. So if you're interested, that's on Thursday. My Eventbrite link is Professional and Entrepreneur Presenters. So it's focused on speaking, which is why, I guess, in a way, I've linked to you, even though I've done a lot of financial modeling. I don't coach financial modeling. I teach people how to find jobs and also how to speak. But that's on Thursday. Danielle, would you like to say anything else before we finish?
No, that's great.
I'll end, stop share, and then look at you. Yes.
I hope people have found that helpful. I think it's a fantastic skill to have. I think having financial modeling on your resume, or certainly on your LinkedIn profile. I mean, if you're looking for a job, you should certainly keep your LinkedIn profile up to date and have all your skills listed. I'm sure you tell people that, Dick, and having all of your skills there and having people endorse your skills. So people can't endorse you if you don't put it up there. Just having financial modeling skills, I think, is something that a lot of finance roles, I'm seeing a lot of roles that are, there might be like financial analyst, or there might be an accounting role or something like that, but part of that role will be financial modeling. They'll need to have some certain element of that, of the role will be as a financial modeler.
Okay, great. And
yeah.
Philippe has said, Philippe has said, "Oh, good webinar, thank you." So thank you, Philippe. So we might just end there, unless anyone wants to say anything at the end, or have a quick question we can answer in 30 seconds. Otherwise, we might just end there. Thank you, Danielle. And when is your next webinar? When is your next thing? Would you like to tell everybody when your next thing?
The meetup. I put the link in for the plumsolutions.com.au/meetup. The next one is on Wednesday at lunchtime. So this is on building a P&L in Power BI.
Power BI, okay. And what time is that? Because I think you've got to cater Sorry.
Yeah, well, I've been sort of swapping between 12:30 lunchtime and sort of 5 or 6, because I've got people all over the world normally that listen in. I know yours is normally more Australian based,
Yeah.
but so 12:30 is kind of like middle of the night in Europe, so we kind of swap between them depending. I've got the guy who is running the one on Wednesday is actually based in Sydney, so we're doing it lunchtime, but last week we had someone in London, so we did it in the evening, so we kind of moved the times around.
Lunchtime on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Terrific. Yeah. So go to plumsolutions.com.au, isn't it? So
.com.au.
.com.au to find out
meetup.
/meetup. And thank you, Danielle, and thank you for everyone who attended. And
thanks, Dick.
All right.
See you later. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.